Hey, all you crazy sci-fi fans. Time for your daily dose of insanity. Over here at the Sci-Fi Shenanigans Podcast with your hosts, J.R. Handley and me, Chris Winder. Just two nerdy veterans geeking out over our science fiction passions. A place where the sky's the limit, space is the place, and nerds run the world. Without further ado.
Welcome to our episode with Nathan Pedde. All right.
Get it right, mister.
I practiced like a whole 3 times or something. I don't understand what happened. But before we get started, so I'm going to again remind you that today's episode, the goal is for me to talk a little bit less and Chris to talk a little bit more. I'm not making any promises.
Totally editing that part out.
I'm making no promises, but we're going to try and let you actually get to meet Chris if we can get him to talk. It's like pulling teeth, but it's probably because his mouth is full of all those dang crowns he's eating.
Yeah, blah, blah.
So today we are talking to Nathan Pedde. Oh, I'm going to get it right, I promise.
Dang, again.
It just looks like Pede. But we're going to talk to Nathan Pedde, who also writes as NA, November Alpha Pedde, who is a father, author, and all-around space nerd who writes science fiction for adults and publishes middle-grade books that he co-writes with his 7-year-old son. Now that he's pulled the genie out of the bottle, he says his 5-year-old daughter also wants him to write books for her. Only I guess fantasy is more her mojo.
For her, with her.
Good question.
I write with them. I don't write for. It's their plot, their story, their characters. They design it. I just put it into words.
So you're the trained monkey.
That's great.
Okay.
Pretty much. And I tried to talk her into science fiction, but she said she wanted to write about fairies.
Well, you could put a fairy in science fiction. I've seen it done.
I tried, but she said no.
So
Sure, it's science fantasy.
Well, it's space fantasy, I think, is how they class it. But so there is actually a book, and I'm drawing a blank on what it was. It was sort of a space fantasy meets thriller, and so they had werewolves, and they had vampires, and they had zombies, but they were scientific explanations for how they came to be, and basically it was genetic engineering run amok.
Right, that's where the author combined like the flu virus and a bunch of other things, and poof, zombies, and it kind of made sense.
Brad Thor, I don't know how you pronounce his last name, but he wrote one about that where they were basically they were looking in the Alps where Hannibal's elephants died, and in Carthage when they were fighting the Romans, and they knew he used somewhat sophisticated for the time, essentially germ warfare. A little bit more complicated than just throwing dead bodies full of bugs at the enemy. And so they combined a snake venom with rabies, and they think that's the explanation, or they posited it in the story anyway, that was the explanation for vampires, because the traits of the two of them would make the fear of the water and and some of the other, in the night, the brightness sensitivity, so preferring night to day and all that. So it's definitely, you can do a lot of things if you can get creative.
That's spooky.
Yeah.
I'm assuming Nathan's not going to be writing those stories with his 5-year-old.
It could happen. I mean,
I can get away with writing that type of stories with my 7-year-old. I've put Paul and Terry into it, and my son wants to kill them off.
that's sweet. So if you don't know,
but it's a middle grade.
That's he's referring to Paul E. Cooley and Terry Mixon from the Dead Robot Society, where all three of us have first met. And they deserve to die. Kill them off. Especially Terry. Make his especially brutal.
He's a history
Definitely.
teacher.
Okay.
I don't know how I'm going to put that together, but he's a history teacher. Paul got the cool one. He's the spy.
I could see that. So normally, this is where, and we sort of got a little bit derailed, we would, after the introduction, we tell the dear listeners how we met this person. And sometimes it's just Google, or we read their book and we liked it, so we tracked them down. But with Nathan, we met, like I met Chris, in the Dead Robot Society Facebook group, where we would nerd out over all things science fiction and literary. And the words specifically, not the academic genre, just being clear. And so when we started the podcast and we started making the announcements, before we recorded our first episode, we had a 4-letter message from Nathan. I volunteer as tribute. How could I refuse? I mean, is that even allowed? Does anyone have their copy of the rule book for District 13? I don't know. So here he is. What about you, Chris? How did you first come across dear old Nathan?
I met him in the Dead Robot Society group as well. We've had a lot of interactions, and I can't remember if I beta read something for him first, or he beta read something for me, or I just sent him a snippet, and then he says, "Yeah, you're really not that funny." And then I felt sad. But somewhere around there, we did some beta reading for each other, and I remember one other thing. I was looking for red shirts for one of my stories. For those who don't know what a red shirt is, it's a reference to Star Trek, where it's always the red shirts, guys and gals wearing the red shirts that die. And he volunteered to be killed off in one of my stories, so I killed him off. So that's how we met.
All right. So what about you, Nathan? How did you first meet Nathan? Let's get all meta.
How I met myself?
Yes.
I haven't really met myself yet. I'm still trying to figure that out. But one thing that I do want to correct you guys is I am not a nerd. I am a geek. Nerds have IQ points to spend. Geeks do not.
Okay.
Nerds did well in school.
I heard nerds collect information, geeks collect things.
That's a good one, too.
I just use the words interchangeably. So,
in high school, everyone would go, "Oh, you're such a nerd. You like this science stuff." And I go, "No, I'm not a nerd. I don't know anything about chemistry. I'm a geek. I geek out on things. I don't actually study the actual how it works."
And if you
try to,
if you haven't caught on, just like Scott Bartlett from last week's episode, Nathan is also from the frozen tundras of Canada. So, if
in other words, he's from Hoth.
We don't actually say that a lot, or at least I tell myself that.
So if you hear some oddities, I swear it's not the quality of the audio. It's just Canada.
Well, we're so far behind in technology that my dog sled is kind of it's cold in this igloo.
Well, then that brings us into my question. If you're so far behind in technology, well, what got you into sci-fi? What do you love about sci-fi?
Well, first, just to clarify, we're not actually behind. Just to stop all you gullible people out there. I heard you Americans were. But the reason why I love sci-fi is the what ifs. I love being able to ask what would happen if this were to happen. The biggest what if is what would happen in the future? How is the future going to shape? What is it going to look like? And just asking those questions just kind of fueled the stories. And then I realized there's lots of stories here. And so then I started writing.
Sure. What's your outtake on the future? Positive, neutral, or negative? Like in real life?
In real life, I like to go with the positive. I try not to be the pessimistic side of things. I don't want to assume that everything is going to go bad. I try to keep things. Trying to figure out a better way to say it. I try and keep things on the better side of things. I'm going to assume that the world's not going to blow up in the next 20 years. I'm going to assume that we get to space. And then I go from there. All these bad things that are happening are hiccups, and they're going to get better.
Sure, live on the positive side of life. Otherwise,
there's already
just miserable the whole time, right?
There's already too much pessimism in this world that we need to have some positivity, and that's what I think the best thing for it is.
I agree.
My writing is to try to keep things positive.
Except of course killing off Paul Cooley.
Well, that's different. I can kill characters off. There's still going to be wars and stuff. That's human nature, but.
Well, what was your first memory of sci-fi? What's the first thing that you saw, read, heard, or did that that really got you hooked.
Do you remember the old Stargate movie?
Yes.
Loved it.
Yes.
With MacGyver.
Wait, what?
What?
Wasn't that the first one with MacGyver?
The actor.
No, it was Kurt Russell.
Are you sure?
Oh, it was Kurt Russell. You're right. I'm thinking
of the series.
I'm thinking the TV show, aren't I? Oh, you're right, Kurt Russell. Oh, okay. I'm gonna have to edit that part out.
It's actually
so. What was it? What was it about Stargate?
It was the seeing other worlds and the mystery behind it. Like, where were they? They're in a pyramid, but they're not on Earth. That was the big thing about it. It's actually funny. I did work on the TV show for a little bit.
You did?
Oh. Tell us about that.
I did a couple years. I live in Vancouver, so I did a couple years working in the film industry as a electric, setting up all the lights. So I did a bunch of day calls on Stargate Atlantis and SG-1.
That's awesome.
He's had a cooler life than us.
I know. All I did is get blown up.
Right. I just ran around fixing computers. Boring.
So, did anybody else notice that, though, whenever we watched all these alien planets on the Stargate series, that they all look like Canada?
If you look at most TV shows, a lot of it looks like Canada.
Oh, that's true, because all the trees, right?
Well, it's because it's cheaper. It's probably cheaper to go up to Canada to film than it is to go to, New Zealand or wherever Lord of the Rings was filmed?
LA.
Yeah, probably.
But that's not necessarily true anymore. There is a big push down in LA to do a lot more American productions. So you will find a lot of stuff being done in the States now.
Well, the reason that they were filmed is because of, at least with regard to where Lord of the Rings was filmed, and I'm drawing a blank on where that was. I want to say it's New Zealand.
New Zealand.
Yeah, that was because of because they have so many terrain features that you could get so many shots on one location. Is what that came down to.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And those films actually made a brand new tourist industry for New Zealand. My daughter just came back from there a few weeks ago.
Cool.
Yeah, awesome pictures.
So, what was it like doing the working on a movie set? I know this is derailing from the sci-fi of the written word, but I'm just curious.
It's hurry up and wait.
So it's like the army.
Panic. Get it set up. And then the stunties have to work at 1/16th speed. So then you're sitting around waiting for something to happen. And then it's hurry up and get it all done so you can wait some more. That's the movie business.
Okay. Now, did you get to talk to any of the actors or any of that cool stuff with the movie?
Not really, no. But the actors, in my mind, they're important, but they're not that important to me. I was more curious about all the cool lights, like the 2,000 watt lights, and the ones that if you look at it, you go blind. I love that stuff. I didn't care about that.
Well, I don't tend to care who acted. Most of the time, I couldn't tell you who, and I don't remember. But because to me, if I know who the actor is and I forget who the character is, then they messed up.
Yeah.
Right. If it doesn't suck you into the story and get you to let go of reality for at least a little while, then it's kind of a fail, huh?
Let me clarify. There's a difference between watching a movie, it's all about the characters. Story-wise, it's all about the characters. Writing it, it's the characters. But when you're on the film set working on it, it's not your business. You don't care about the script. You're supposed to set up that light and aim it where the gaffer tells you to aim it.
It's all about getting the job done.
Exactly. And it's not important about the actors going on and saying a bunch of lines. That's immaterial. When you're working on the film set, it's all about getting your job done. If you're the sound guy, is this audio good?
So you're telling me
who cares who's saying?
So what you're telling me though is that you didn't talk to Colonel O'Neill?
I didn't talk to Colonel.
Dang it.
Sorry.
Yeah, he lost a couple cool points.
He was almost.
I stood next to Jessica Alba.
That counts. Okay.
Okay, you got him back.
I didn't know it was her though at the time.
Oh, no, the guy again.
All the other guys are like, you were standing next to Jessica Alba. I'm like, really? But she's so short.
All right. So, that's your question quiz. See, I'm trying to let you talk today.
So, what question are we on? 7?
6.
We did 6.
No, so it's what is his first memory of reading and playing games in the genre of books, movies, TV, whatever?
Right, and he said Stargate.
No. See, this is how professional we are, people. I'm blaming Canada. I'm sorry. Sorry, Scott. Sorry, Nathan. I'm blaming Canada.
You're going to have to invade Canada again.
All right.
Well, South Park did it first, so.
Okay, so besides Stargate, do you have any other memories of getting hooked on sci-fi?
KOTOR.
A what?
Knights of the Old Republic.
Oh, yes.
The video games.
I think it's on Steam now.
It is. I own the disc, though, so I don't have it on Steam, but that's beside the point.
That was a fun game.
I love science fiction video games. I love the one I'm currently playing is Fallout 4. That's the big distraction right now.
I do love me some Fallout.
Yeah, it's post-apocalyptic.
So
it was on sale. I had to buy it.
What faction did you join?
I joined the Minutemen.
You didn't join the New California Republic?
I'm not sure what you're talking about. I'm only like 3 hours in.
There's still time.
I just started.
All right. So how did your love of the genre of science fiction, the books, the video games, the TV series, how did that transition into writing books in that genre?
Well, when I was growing up here in the White North, I didn't see a lot of science fiction books in the bookshelf. It was all fantasy, which is great on its own, but it's not as you don't have as much freedom. I find there's with fantasy, you have too many rules to be stuck around.
Oh,
and so science fiction is freedom, and it wasn't until I discovered the indie scene that I realized that hey, people actually still read this. This is still a thing, and then I started writing it because people read it.
Now, that's been interesting. That's a question I've had, and I guess I didn't realize Canada was so diversified. But on the eastern part of Canada, sci-fi is doing well. But are you saying that on the western part, it's not quite as popular as it may be elsewhere?
I don't see them. They don't have as large a section in the bookstores.
Interesting.
Well,
I never really considered. I thought Canada was Canada.
Well, but is it because they're not?
Is Tennessee like Texas?
Well, I mean, mostly except for the Spurs and the Hats. New York?
Okay.
Oh, well, okay.
We're as diversified as you guys are. It's just you guys don't realize it.
So
I stand corrected.
But I wonder how much of that is because the transition away from physical books and bookstores to the ebooks. I wonder how much of it's that versus it's maybe not as popular.
That's what it is in a nutshell. If you go on Amazon.ca, science fiction is as popular as Amazon.com. But in the books, you go to Chapters, which is our big Barnes Noble bookstore. They don't get as big of a shelf space as fantasy does,
and that's why they're going out of business because they don't know where the money's at.
Pretty much.
And here's an interesting thing too. I wonder if they have a smaller piece on the bookshelf because sci-fi readers might be more technically savvy and therefore might be buying their books online.
I would put money on there too.
How much money are we talking?
I'm starting to figure out the mystery.
Canadian dollars?
It's Canadian money. It doesn't count.
You can have some of my Monopoly money.
Outstanding. So, how did you woke up one day and you said, "I want to write, and I'm going to write science fiction because it's way cooler than all the other stuff." But how did you go from that to writing with your children, which I think is totally cool? My youngest son has told me
it's way cool.
Has told me I'm writing a book with him. Only he wants to write about time travel and Tony Stark.
First, how old is your son?
He's 9.
Perfect time. What happened was when my son was 4, I'll tell you the long version of the story. When he was 4, he would come up to me and says, I want to write like you. And so he'd take a whole bunch of paper, staple them together, and draw little doodles, which is super cute for a 4-year-old to do. And he did that for a couple years. And then he got more ambitious. I came home one day to find him on my word processor. He created a new document and was typing out his own story.
Cool.
That was a little bit of a panic moment. I won't lie. Did he delete my story? That thought went through my head. And so at that point, I decided that instead of scaring him away from being creative, which I'm not against scaring people away from being creative, I decided that, why don't we just write one together instead of having him keep on going the route he was and ruining something of mine.
Sure.
Okay.
So I asked him,
problem solved and encouraged.
The reason he panicked, though, in case you don't know, listeners, is it's so cold in Canada that the cloud doesn't work, so he can't store them off-site. It freezes the cloud.
The cloud is frozen.
That's right. He can't save them on the cloud because it's Canada.
I haven't started saving things on clouds yet.
What? What is wrong with you?
I'm from Canada. What do you expect?
Dropbox for the win. We should get them to sponsor an episode. I'm telling you.
Right.
But yeah, I went up to Donnie and I went, okay, let's write a story together. And he goes, I want to write one about spies in space.
Okay.
So
Good
I
idea.
went, okay, science fiction, espionage, it is. And then I went, well, I'm not going to write an adult one with him. So I decided to write middle grade because he's 7. Now,
sure, who better to do it?
So now I have book 1 is published, book 2 and 3 are with the editor, and I'm working on book 4.
So if this takes off, he might have written his way through college money.
That's the hope.
So buy his books, people. His kid wants to go to school.
So tell us the title of book 1.
Missile Attack.
All right.
Okay.
He named it.
And whose name is it under? Is it under yours? Your son's both?
It is on the cover. It's both of us. It is from both, but my name is first, just because I have the account. So.
Yep, no problem.
All right. Does this make him the coolest kid on the playground? I've published a book.
It makes him the biggest geek on the playground. Everyone else just talks about their Iron Man collection.
Right now he can hold up his nose and say, yes, peasants, I wrote a book.
He actually wants to do his own world building and create his own story about dragons.
So how?
That's great.
Well, Lindsay Broker proves you can put dragons in science fiction. So how space fantasy people? So how do you guys do your world building? Do you do it pen and paper? Do you start a Word document? Do you use the dreaded Scrivener, Archivos, any of those programs out there? How do you two do that?
I'd use whatever's handy. I've typed it up. I've done it in notepads. I have 100 of them somewhere in about my fantasy world. But I just write them down somewhere and I just plop it in my head. And then I write it in Scrivener.
Boo. Word for the win.
I like Scrivener.
Scrivener's awesome. It's better than Word.
You heathens.
Well, what happened was I started writing my story in a Word, but then I decided that chapter 2 wasn't chapter 2, it was chapter 8. Chapter 1 was chapter 7. And then I had to...
Oh, sure. And it's easy to scoot everything around. And
it was so easy with
rearrange
Scrivener. So much easier. Just move and copy and...
So besides Missile Attack and all the works you've done with your kid, what have you written by yourself? Tell us about those.
The other major one that I have done that's not a middle grade fiction is one that is coming out in April. It should be. It's scheduled for publish. It's called Culture Shock. It is a post-apocalyptic about what happens if the premise is what happens if you're living in a major city like, say, Tokyo, and Yellowstone blows up.
Ooh, I love post-apocalyptic. I love seeing how people get through things or don't.
It's really nice. It's where I toe tag JR.
I think everybody should toe tag JR.
I agree. Take that, Joe Buckley.
I couldn't give him he wanted to go down in a blaze of glory. He's a United States Air Force trombone player.
He's a Zoomy and a band member. That's awesome.
This one time at band camp,
I got blown up, sort of.
Well, depending on your definition of blow.
You ready?
So
you can cut that out.
No, it's fine. So the books with your son, have they at least earned back I was going to say your advance, but with your editing costs and all of that, or is this just more a passion project for you?
I would love for it to, but the problem is you don't get a lot of middle grade kids buying books. So you're relying on the parents to buy the books, and it's a little slow. It's middle grade.
I knew middle grade was a harder market. If you could make it YA, I know those tend to sell better. The problem with middle grade is, are those kids really reading them on ebooks, or are they reading the physical?
They're reading the physical books from bookstores. That's
or from libraries. I imagine at their school.
Yeah,
I probably won't be writing too many middle grade books. Probably will keep it to the one series, and I'll just transition it to more adult books of some kind with them. Just because I unfortunately have to do what sells as well. Middle grade doesn't sell.
Well, YA does if you transition the book's just a little bit more mature, but you could still keep it clean for your son.
Oh, exactly.
I could see that.
So what's the name of the universe that you and your son writing? Is it named? Do you have a name for it?
The universe that the adult books are in is Shattered Worlds.
Mm-hmm.
And his books are in the Children of the Shattered Worlds.
Ooh, I like that. So there's some crossover between them.
There is. The main character's name is Des O'Neill. And his father... In the beginning of the book, there's a major war going on between the Jovian League, which is in Jupiter, and the Earth Alliance, which is around Earth.
Mm-hmm.
And the kid's father had died in the war. He's an orphan living with his uncle. However, the main character, his father, isn't actually dead. Spoiler. Is actually the main character in another one that I plan is working title is The Mercenaries.
Oh, I love it when books can spread out and reference each other and
there is going to be a scene in what Donnie wants is the next series, not this one, but the next one, of where the dad and the boy Des meet up.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome.
All right. Well, this would be a good time to put a pause in the conversation for a word from our sponsor.
Hey listeners, Josh Hayes here, co-host of Keystroke Media. I hope you're enjoying this episode of Sci-Fi Shenanigans. I tell you, we're really excited about what JR and Chris are doing with the podcast and are proud to feature them as part of our podcast partner network. When you get done listening to this episode, I'd like to invite you to come check out our own podcast at KeyStrokeMedium.com. You can find all our previous episodes and check out all the amazing authors we've had on the show. If you're free on Mondays, mark your calendars for 11 a.m. Come hang out with us as we talk to today's leading science fiction and fantasy authors and other industry professionals. We've got a great live audience who get into a lot of shenanigans of their own, as JR and Chris can attest. That's every Monday morning at 11 a.m. Central Standard Time, live on Keystroke Media. We're going to talk about some reading, we're going to talk about some writing, and of course, everything in between. And now I'll let you get back to some more shenanigans with JR and Chris. Have a great day.
All right, so thank you for our wonderful sponsors. Wonderful, I say. Everybody says so. And so we were just talking about the universe that you're writing in, and I just wanted to make sure we were clear. So the worlds that your son is writing in with you, and the worlds you write yourself, that is the same larger universe?
Yes.
So what made you decide to do it that way as opposed to just separate entities that, one was your thing with him and one was your thing with yourself? Phrasing, but
there's two main reasons. The first one is my kid is 7 and has the attention span of a 7-year-old.
Yeah.
I honestly didn't think he was going to be so gung-ho about this. He just writing books with me is the best thing to him for in this universe, according to him. I didn't think it was going to be like that. I thought maybe he would lose interest after a month. I'd read the first book and he'd be, okay, I'm done. That was fun. Thanks, Dad. But no, he's world building and creating new stories and have lots of story ideas running around in his noggin. Wow. So when he said we decided to write a story together, I chose my world because which is the second reason, I have a love-hate relationship with world building. I love world building, but I hate it because it's time consuming and kills time, and then I lose track and it's been 2 months and I haven't written anything. So one less world is always better.
Okay, so I this is a little bit of an ad lib, so bear with me, Chris, because I'm fascinated. In case it wasn't clear, because we've talked about it, but Chris and I both have our own kids as well. So this idea that you're writing with your son is just it's intriguing to me. So how does your process work? Do you go somewhere, sit down with a notepad and take notes over coffee at Denny's or whatever the Canadian version is? I don't know.
There's a Denny's up here, but yes.
Wow.
It is pretty much that. Is I sit down. My normal process is I'm a discovery writer. Signpost discovery writer. Sorry. So I'll just create signposts and write to the signposts. But with my kids, because it's not my story, I sit down with them and I create an outline. Who's the main character? What do they do? And then I try and direct them into more of how should the story goes. Like my daughter wanted me to write a story about Moana. I said no. And so I had to work with her. It took me an hour to figure out some type of story and, translating a 5-year-old.
Sure, you're going to draw the story out of them.
Exactly. They go, well, I want to write about Iron Man. Well, no, I'm not writing about Iron Man. What do you like about Iron Man?
Right.
I like the fact that he can fly. Okay, well, the character can fly. That's just a bad example, but that's how I do it.
So have you ever played around with them with the fantasy name generator?
No, I haven't yet.
You know what I'm talking about?
I know what you're talking about, but I get my names from my wife. She names all my stories, all my characters.
Oh, okay.
How does that work?
I say, hun, here's the name for my main character. And she says, Nathan, you're stupid. It should be this. That's a bad name. She doesn't say you're stupid. She goes, that's a stupid name. We should come with something better. How about this name?
Okay. Well,
whatever works. Everyone's got their own process.
Hey, well,
you know who wears the pants in that family.
Well, I created a name and it was Michael. She goes, don't name him Michael. Like, why not? Michael's a great name. Name him something better than Michael.
Ouch. I have a few Michaels in my family.
That was the problem. We have lots of Michaels in the family.
But that's kind of an interesting thing because authors can be way too close to their story. And if they get someone who can actually give them some honest feedback, that's a huge benefit.
It is.
Yeah. Interesting.
She also helps me with names of titles. I'm usually too on the nose for a title, and she goes that the missile attack was Donnie's title, which is fine, but My fantasy one was Felix the Swift. And she goes, no, that's not a very good book title. Let's figure out something better, which is what's Phantom Sorcerer.
Okay.
So we, most of the time, writers have certain rituals they do to help them sort of trick their brain. Do you guys, you and your son collectively, have any rituals you do around your writing? Like you always write in this chair, or you always are drinking this beverage, or, fill in the blank?
I try not to. I find having rituals tends to, if you don't do the ritual, you can't write.
Oh.
I keep it where I don't have a ritual, so I can just sit down and write. I don't need to, I must go to Starbucks and buy a venti, whatever. It's just, I sit down and I write.
Okay. Well, who's been the largest influence on your writing? What other author, and this is actually kind of a two-part question. Do you read sci-fi books to your kids, or do you watch movies together? How did they get into sci-fi?
Donnie's a big Star Wars fan.
Okay.
And now
one of us.
And now with The Force Awakens and what was the next one? The Last Jedi. Mm-hmm. Now my daughter loves Rey. So they're complete, their gateway drug is Star Wars.
Leia was cooler than Rey, but
Yeah, but right now Leia is old.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true.
So she can't relate to her where, the 5-year-old can relate to Rey.
Such ageism.
Pretty much.
So who's your favorite sci-fi author besides yourself and your son?
My favorite sci-fi author? Mm-hmm. You guys are going to laugh at me.
No, probably not.
I can't.
Well, maybe.
If I can pronounce it properly, Riki Kawahara.
Oh,
Okay.
You don't know?
Never heard of them.
It's the Sword Art Online light fiction books author.
Okay.
It's a complete lit RPG book, but
I like lit RPG. I like lit RPG, so don't feel bad about that.
All right, so we will have that link in the show notes. We'll track that down so you can see what this person is writing.
Sometimes it's a little weird because he's Japanese and he's you have to view it through their cultural lens.
That's fair
because their culture is different than ours, but they're interesting. The premise is what happens if you go into a virtual reality game where you're plugged in, like Matrix style, and you can't get out. And if you die, you're dead.
I like it.
Okay.
So that was...
So what was the premise for your universe?
My universe, I asked the what if question, what would the world be 500 years from now? Mm-hmm. How do we get to Mars? Does NASA get us to Mars? Or is it SpaceX that gets us to Mars? Once we're in Mars, do we terraform it? How can we terraform it? And just started asking these questions. Like I said, world building. I lost 2 months.
Yeah. But once you have the world built, pretty much a lot of the work is done. Do your kids help you further develop that?
They do. The space station and the Jovian League was built out of necessity for Donnie and his stories. I needed a full-fledged country orbiting Jupiter. And he wants to write the next story on Venus.
Okay.
Because I told him what Venus is like and 500 years from now. I decided to have Venusaurs.
That's great.
Dinosaurs?
Right.
I don't know if you guys remember the old science fiction from the 50s where Venus was always a jungle planet and there's always dinosaurs on it.
I don't, but now I want to read this.
So this was in the Highland era of science fiction, right? Where they thought that Mars was colonizable easily.
Right, when they still thought they were green men.
John Carter did it.
When they thought they were still little green men on Mars.
Exactly, and they thought there was canals on Mars and all sorts of stuff. But what they
Hey, John Carter did it. He was there. All right.
But what I decided to do was to figure out some type of semi-plausible way that there could be dinosaurs on Venus, genetically modified, of course. Ooh. So I looked at how do we do that and figured out the way to how would you terraform Venus? All right, what's the problems with Venus? And it basically is 50 kilometers off the surface of Venus. Do you guys know the problem with Venus at the moment?
Isn't it really hot and like 50% sulfur or something?
880 degrees Celsius. I can't remember the Fahrenheit.
About a billion
Americans. Something like that. And it is 92 bars.
What does that mean?
So it's we're at 0.98 bars. It's air pressure.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And
so Venus is 864 degrees Fahrenheit.
Exactly. So that's the problem with it. But the 50 kilometers off the surface of the planet, it is about 36 degrees Celsius and it's about 1.6 something bars. I can't remember the exact measurement. But if you were to float in a city 50 kilometers up, you could live comfortably.
Oh.
You'll still need air tanks and stuff because the oxygen, you couldn't breathe that atmosphere, but you're not going to crush to death.
Not going to crush, and the atmosphere is not going to boil you or melt you away.
Exactly. So now, if you figure out some way to build these floating cities, then at that point, since you're there, you just have to lower the temperature, and that's just capturing all that carbon.
Interesting.
I'm simplifying it.
Okay.
I'm simplifying a very complicated situation, but that's what I do in my universe. And then I thought, well, if they had brought the temperature down to reasonable degrees, and they're looking at, well, what plants could go in there, and I thought, well, why not have reptiles? Reptiles like the heat. So it would be something that would be logical that they would try. They have plants and trees and grass on Venus. Why not reptiles? And then why not, if I have reptiles going, what happens if there's something on Venus that makes them grow larger?
Oh, sure. Might as well.
Might as well, because, hey, I'm a science fiction author. I'm not writing hard science fiction.
Right.
I can make stuff up. So I did.
So when you are doing this writing, what do you think is the largest influence on your individual writing and then with what you and your son do collectively?
Like, for instance, is it the stuff you've already read before? Is there anything current? When you see something, does it inspire you to say, I know what the next chapter is going to be about?
That's a hard question. I get inspired by lots of things. For story-wise, I get inspired by even little things by story-wise. I try not to keep any one thing as this is what inspired me, because then I just get a copycat.
Oh, okay.
I try and keep it where if I have influence and inspiration from things, it's a whole bunch of little things that I piece together to form a unique thing. So instead of people looking at it and going, "Oh, that is, Star Wars. Why did you write Star Wars?" I don't want that. I want them to go, I see Star Wars elements, but I don't see Star Wars itself.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Are you one of those authors who, while he's really digging into writing, won't watch anything or read anything sci-fi because you're afraid it might influence what you're doing right now?
No, I read lots of things. Hey. I go the opposite route because you can't write in a vacuum. You can't see things. I mean, hell, I went to a restaurant with my kids that was pirate themed. and hanging from the ceiling was a pirate ship kite.
Oh.
And my son looks up and says, "Hey, Dad, doesn't that look like a great idea for a story?" And I looked at it going, "Flying pirate ship. It is kind of cool. I wonder how I could work that into one of my worlds."
That's great.
So does your wife get involved with the world building with the kids, or is that just something you do with them?
It's something I do. My wife is an artist. She's going to the local university for visual arts.
And she does watercolors.
And so she does watercolor. She does amazing watercolors. And she plans on, now she's done a lot of charcoal. She's done a lot of oil paintings now, acrylics. I can give you guys a link to her Instagram and for show notes, and she's going to be doing my covers.
Boss Lady Pedde. That is how they will be listed in the show notes. Boss Lady.
She'll get a kick out of that.
That's great.
Well, as long as she's not kicking you, we're in okay territory. So, where do you see now? You've mentioned the stories you're writing with your son. You're going to Venus next with Venus Raptors, but what about the stories you're writing in that universe on your own? Where do you see that sort of going?
Well, I have 2 main story series planned out. I have the Mercenary one, but that is happening at the current time. But I also have one that I've called, right now it's called The Inescapable Game. And this is I'm calling it the origin story of this universe.
Okay.
So what it is originally I thought, we'll just get to the stars naturally, right? Then I thought, well, I want some aliens in this. And I went, how do I get aliens without being the standard, Star Trek or Battlestar Galactica or,
What's wrong with that?
It's been done before. So
you could do it better.
So what I've decided to do is the aliens show up before we're spacefaring. Maybe we have a colony on Mars that someone set up. It doesn't matter. But these aliens are, of course, they've traveled across the galaxy. They're way more advanced than us. But they don't come to conquer us or to influence us and change us, peacefully. They come for entertainment. They kidnap 5 million of us. Just out of the blue, just 5 million.
Jerks.
Into an orbiting space station around Jupiter, where we fight to the death.
Oh, so they turn us into gladiators.
Yeah, pretty much. There is a backstory for it. They're not just doing it for solely entertainment, because I wanted more story with it. They're ultimately have you seen WALL-E?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The humans on WALL-E, how they kind of fat and lazy, and
yep,
that's the aliens. That's what the aliens have turned into, because while they're immortal, they don't die of disease or old age, so you have to shoot them in the head to kill them. So they live for a very long time. They're all lazy. And now there's this great enemy that's coming. But they're not soldiers. There's no way they're going to be soldiers. They're looking for soldiers. They're looking for a race that they can manipulate genetically and cybernetically. And
that's cool.
We happen to be it. So I have 3 series planned out for this origin story. Story creep, I tell ya. But I have the Inescapable Game, which is going to be the story of the main character Seamus in the game, trying to defeat the game, and that's going to be very much an RPG style game. So I can have fantastical weapons and cybernetic implants and all that wonderful stuff that you see in sci-fi stories. And eventually he gets out, which is going to transition into a military sci-fi where he's going to be fighting this war for the aliens.
Neat.
And at the end of that series, because I have all these little bits and pieces planned out, but at the end of that series, it's going to end with him rebelling against his aliens, trying to get him and a ship or two home. And when they're going home, the main character has to open the warp gate to get them through the spaceship to get home, and he gets left behind. And so he freezes himself. Right? Cryostasis,
Sure.
That's the word. And once he freezes himself, the third series will be him waking up at normal time.
Now I'm thinking about your kids and thinking about this story. Are they gonna? Do you think that they'll write some younger kids' books in the origin stories as well?
They might later, once they get a little older.
Mm-hmm.
I can see some YA novels in this.
Oh yeah,
but when they're at 7, probably not.
Okay,
but I mean, I have between 9 and 15 books planned out for this.
Nice.
So it's going to take to get.
What have you learned about co-writing with your kids? What has that taught you about writing? And do you have any advice for other authorly duos? Have you seen things that get in the way or things that work really well? I know not everyone's going to be writing with really young kids, but what kind of advice could you offer?
My big advice with I haven't done any co-authoring with any adult writers, so I don't know anything about that.
Mm-hmm.
But when you're writing with kids, is you have to be patient and you have to be able to read between the lines, because a lot of their stories, as when they tell you, are not writable. They want to write about Iron Man and Moana. They want to relive the movie that interested them. You have to be able to look at that movie and mold it into an original story. They say, I want to write a story about spies in space. That can go lots of different ways. It's sitting down and asking those questions and figuring out what's the best way to tell their story that they want to tell. Like my daughter wanted to write a story about Belle and Moana, mm-hmm. because Belle has a yellow dress and Moana sails on a boat. But those bits and pieces of information, you could world build and create an entirely unique story that includes those elements.
Okay. I guess it helps then when you can also ground them and send them to their room. You don't want to do it my way? Go stand in a corner.
I don't do that. I don't punish them for creativeness.
Hey, Chris, you're grounded.
Yes, Chris, you are grounded.
Drag again.
So I guess this is where we say shameless plugging is over. Enough about your books. What are you specifically reading in the science fiction genre at the moment, other than the books you just mentioned? Is there anything else?
I'm reading the book called The War Dogs by Greg Bear. It's a book about, I don't know if you guys heard it, it's a book about where aliens have come and the soldiers are fighting for them, kinda. And it's all...
I have not. So what's the generic premise? No spoilers, but...
I'll read the back cover. The Gurus made their presence on Earth known 13 years ago, providing technology and scientific insights far beyond mankind's capability. They became indispensable advisors and promised even more gifts. But they were followed by mortal enemies from sun to sun and planet to planet. Now the Gurus are stretched thin, and they need humanity's help.
Okay. That sounds interesting.
Wow. Yeah, that sounds cool.
Are you reading anything other than the Galaxy's Edge stuff you started last week, Chris, or are you still working on that?
Still working on that and trying to stay on task because there's so much good stuff out there right now.
Yeah, there is. I started book 4 of the Mech War series by Scott Bartlett, and then he sent out in his newsletter the free prequel. I'm like, ooh, shiny. So now I started that one instead.
Yep.
So I'll eventually yes, exactly. I'll eventually finish them and write reviews on them.
All right, so Nathan, are there any scientific breakthroughs that you're following right now? Anything you're excited by?
Right now, I'm excited by the EM drive. I'm excited by SpaceX. I honestly think SpaceX is going to land a man on Mars way before NASA does.
You think SpaceX will be the first one to actually have a real working, powerful EM drive?
I don't know about the EM drive, but I'm not. Last time I heard it was still a theory. Which.
Oh, yeah. With all that money and all that innovation, I think he might do it.
Well, they've recently. We talked about this in the 2017 in review tech episodes, but they recently in the UK, if I'm remembering the article correctly, they got a patent for part of it. So, unless this is an elaborate trolling exercise, it seems like someone's making progress because, you can't just patent nothing, I don't think. There has to be something here.
Oh, exactly. And I find the EM drive fascinating because the scientists have said it shouldn't work. But it does.
Right. They said the Bumblebee shouldn't be able to fly either.
And looking at NASA and SpaceX and their missions to get a man on Mars, I think SpaceX is going to do it with the BFG. The Falcon 9 was the heavy one. Falcon Heavy was a complete success. So are there plans for the BFG? I think that is going to be successful, and it's going to say what he says it's going to be.
Awesome. Okay, what are you following, JR?
So I've been watching all the awesomeness that is the Heavy Falcon launch, like Nathan was, and I've been watching a lot of the images from Starman on his intergalactic Tesla Roadster. So I realize he missed his original intended orbit. But who are we to boss around the one and only Starman? So if he wants to go somewhere else, I say let him.
I just found out that I can look up space launches in advance. Here I am writing sci-fi, and I didn't know that I could go to space.com. The link will be in the show notes. And they'll update it as things change, of course, weather conditions, technical difficulties, launches will change. But I didn't realize I could look it up, and then I could plan to be outside next time California launches a nice one and see it go up. So I'm kind of geeking out about that. I'm looking forward to that. Can I add that to my calendar?
Outstanding. So that's going to be interesting to see how that plays out for sure. I didn't know about this either, so I'm going to have to bookmark this.
Awesome.
So where did you find this?
Oh, I found this at space.com. So I've got the link in the show notes.
Outstanding. So, Nathan, where can people find you?
You can find me on Twitter at NAPedde. And then you can find me on my website at peddehouse.com. And then I have an Amazon page under Nathan Pedde.
Outstanding. And all of those, as usual, will be in the show notes. And what about us, Chris? Where can they find us?
Our website is sfshenanigans.com. Our Twitter handle is at SFS, that's Sierra Foxtrot Sierra _show. And our email is podcast@sfshenanigans.com.
Thank you for spending some of your precious time with us. For Chris Winder, I'm J.R. Hanley, and this was the Sci-Fi Shenanigans Podcast. We'll be back next week at the same time, where we'll indulge our love of space and all things that go boom.